Awesome. Well, folks, that is always my favorite way to start any event is a little bit of Celia, a little bit of música, and also to recognize the fact that la vida es un carnaval, that la vida has been crazy this year in 2020. I want to recognize in this space that if this had been any other year, we'd probably be meeting in person. We'd be able to give y'all high fives and hugs. But the beautiful thing about technology is that we can still connect no matter where we're from. I see people that, are in other countries, that are across the United States. So it's so beautiful for us to be able to connect together regardless of where we are. Today's session and what you all are joining today is, we called it a fireside chat, but really what it is, it's a Zoom side plática. A conversation with my homeboy Christian to dive a little bit deeper on your right to vote. And for those of us that aren't eligible to vote, also touching on some ways that we can actually still get involved, because whether or not you are eligible to vote or not, there are ways for us to get involved. So without further ado, I'm just going to do a quick intro of myself. My name is Amber Michelle Gonzalez Vargas. I am the daughter of Marco Gonzalez and Sylvia Vargas, two immigrants from the beautiful country of Peru. I am currently calling from Stockton, California, which is also the land of the Miwok people. I am sharing that because yesterday somebody asked me to do a land recognition, and I think that it is so beautiful to not only recognize the land that we're on, but also recognize the indigenous communities and the indigenous blood that runs through many of the veins of the Latinx community. So I'm the senior program manager at the Latino Community Foundation, where our mission is to unleash the civic and economic power of Latinos in California. And I am super, super excited to have us joined here by my colleague, my homeboy, Christian Arana, who I like to think about him as like the the woke sabio on the elections. So really, like, Christian knows everything. He is our policy director over at the Latino Community Foundation, but is really trying to bring love and culture back into the political space. So Christian, I want to let you introduce a little bit more about yourself. And would be great if you can also share with the folks maybe the first time that you felt that you were ever civically engaged.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Amber, and thank you to all of you that are attending virtually. I saw someone was tuning in from Amsterdam. It's probably like late at night for you, so good for you for attending this session. So like Amber mentioned, my name is Christian Arana. I'm the policy director at the Latino Community Foundation. I am the son of Wilfredo and Norma Arana, two immigrants from Guatemala. They came here in the 1980s. So if there are any Chapinas on the line, drop a note. We're probably related. So, but yeah, to your question, Amber, one of the first times I was civically engaged, for those who may be old enough to remember, Proposition 187 in California, that was a ballot proposition back in 1994. That sought to prevent undocumented immigrants from accessing education, healthcare, and other social services. It was going to affect people like my parents, who at the time were undocumented, right? And so I was only 6 years old when this happened, but I do remember going to the big march in downtown Los Angeles with my dad and my two other brothers. To go march. At the time, I didn't know what I was protesting, but I knew I was protesting something, right? And of course, over the years, I realized the significance of that moment, right? About how this proposition, under a certain politician here in California, we're trying to deny immigrants their very basic human rights, right? And ever since that moment, and as Amber knows this all too well, those moments have influenced the type of work that I do at the Latino Community Foundation to make sure that Latinos and all people just in general, right, that they understand that when they do speak up, like, change is actually possible.
That's right, Christian. And I want to also encourage you all, we're going to try and make this session as interactive as possible, because for us, it's also super helpful to learn from you, from the community. Like, LCF is all about, like, we're not here to tell y'all really what to do, but we're here to work with y'all wherever you're at. So if you all want to share what your first experience with civic engagement was, feel free to do so on the chat. No pressure at all. But I can
share. A sister from Guatemala right there.
yeah, from Zacapa. Hola, Lucia. That's awesome. I'll share with you all that my first touch with civic engagement was probably when I was 5 years old. I was actually working, I was helping and learning alongside English with my Mama Leonor, with my abuela, when she was trying to become a citizen. Shout out to anybody who remembers Inglés Sin Barreras. Hey. So we used to watch the videos together in her room and really trying to learn English together. Unfortunately, she was never able to get her citizenship before she passed away. But some of my favorite memories when I was little was that. And of course, as a 5-year-old, I had no idea that was any form of civic engagement, but it definitely was something that was so memorable and important for me to go back. So now I think it's kind of really good to sort of jump right in and be like, listen, y'all, we're less than a month away from the election.
Well, yeah, and actually, before we jump into that, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But
No, go for it. It's a plática.
As you were talking about that, I noticed that your story began at 5 years old. My story began at 6 years old. And so for anyone that may be parents watching this right now, as we jump into these topics about voting, just because if you may have a 5 or 6 year old, don't think that they're not internalizing what you're doing.
That's right.
Right. So yeah, that just occurred to me as you were talking about how those moments stuck with us.
That's right. And when we think about it, it's also these things that one is memorable for us as young people, babies, if you will. But it's also really, it speaks to the fact how our community can and has been civically engaged, whether or not it's been officially and in our face, right? I will say, it's interesting, actually, Christian, now that we're sort of story sharing, you also reminded me recently, I was talking with my boyfriend and he described me in this way that I had never thought about before. And he's like, oh, you're like a US born Peruvian immigrant. And I was like, oh, yes, I am. And here's the reason why, right? I identify so much with the immigrant experience, even though I was born here. And sure, and what I mean by that, right, is Spanish was my first language. I remember learning about different systems with alongside my parents, pretty much up until the age of 16 or so. I think my dad became a citizen when I was 16 years old. So growing up, we were voting, but we were voting in the Peruvian elections. We would go to San Francisco to the consulate and we would do our voting that way, right? And so for me, it was there was different ways of civic engagement for me. And it really is something that is so, being involved in community right. is my civic engagement, right? My family hasn't always been eligible to vote. Until the age of 18, we are not eligible to vote, but we are engaged because I think that speaks to the familial aspect of the Latinx cultura, right? It's like us trying to support each other, to uplift each other. And for me, that's what's really exciting about our potential power and what we're already seeing across the state, across the country, in terms of our voting power, right? And I think that's a great segue into just kind of where we're at today, right? Because we're the largest voting group this year. Isn't that right, Christian?
So do you want to, I can not to sound very wonky, but let me just break it down for people, right?
Break it down, Christian, break it down.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm feeling a little bit old here because I see Angel said that his first interaction was in 2008. I was in college at the time, so but good. But I'm glad people are sharing their stories on this. But all right, so let me just break it down. There are 32 million Latinos who are eligible to vote in this election. 32 million, right? Here in the state of California, where me and Amber are, there are roughly about 8 million. So essentially 1 in 4 Latino voters lives in the state of California, right? To really understand the Latino vote, you have to understand, in reality, what we're talking about here is the youth vote, right? Because roughly half of those 32 million are under 35 years old, right? So, it seems like I feel like me and Amber are always in these conversations about this idea of a sleeping giant, right? When are these people are actually going to wake up and vote, right? But the better question is, well, when are people actually going to care to actually win our votes, right? When are people actually going to care to actually educate us about voter registration and why voting is so important, right? So I just want to offer that right at the very top because Latinos are the second largest voting bloc, but among ethnic groups, we are the largest ethnic bloc in this election, right? And I'm sure we can talk about this later on and as people have questions, but when people tell you or when you hear things about how Latinos will make the difference in this election, like that's not nonsense. That's not just us hyping ourselves up. It's actually the truth.
That's right. That's right. And Christian, I think you bring up a really great point, right? I think for us, it's also the impact also that the elections are having on us, right? Again, you mentioned both you and I are from California, where we are the majority of the population here. So the way that I talk about our work often at LCF is that the work that we're doing, you know, it's people I think to like to say, oh, like the Latino issue, but like in a state like California, the Latino issue is the California issue, because if our comunidad is not thriving, if they're not going out to vote, if they're not entrepreneurs, if they're not the CEOs of companies, that is a problem. Right. That is a problem in our state, well, right? So,
yeah, and it's also interesting because I mean, I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this right now, when you hear messages from either candidates or their campaigns, usually when they think about the Latino vote, they just automatically go to immigration, right? And so while that will forever be a very personal issue for our community, to your point, Amber, I'm like, I'm sorry, like Latinos care about jobs, healthcare, education, just like any other voter, right? So why would candidates and campaigns not address those issues with a Latino context, right? So forgive me for sounding a little bit frustrated, but it happens every single year. But for those of us that are attending this session right now, just this understanding that we actually don't have to accept this, right? Like when we interact with candidates or campaigns, even beyond like the presidential election, like how is a particular ballot measure going to affect your community, right? So those are the types of things for people to think about.
That's right, Christian. And I think I want to call that out and just like bring that into the space, because I do feel like even on our team, and I'm seeing it also like sometimes in the chat, but like the frustration is real right now, right? I think that right now, in particular with this year, it's frustrating that we often get overlooked. It's frustrating that even today, candidates aren't coming out to the Latinx community. Candidates aren't always going to areas and regions like the Central Valley, like the Inland Empire in California, which are predominantly Latinx, predominantly farm workers. That's a problem. That is a problem, because that's also like we're ignoring a complete part of the population because we're like, they don't care. And it's not that we don't care. It's that we are just not being reached out to, and things are being more complicated than they need to be.
And it's I already know how I'm going to act once the election is over, because if we see the data and we see the articles about how Latinos did not come out to vote, and like we can't trust them and blah blah blah, I'm like, absolutely not. Latinos are paying attention. You're actually let me measure my words here before I start cursing. But you have to reach out to us, right? And if I could just be frank here, why do white people vote at the rates that they do, right? Because candidates and campaigns they essentially get the buffet of campaign services for them. They speak in their language. They talk to them in person. They talk to them about the issues that they care about. They're on TV, radio, send the mailers. We don't get any of that with Latinos, right? And if it is, it's a 15-second commercial on Univision, and that's what they call Latino Outreach, right? And as I mentioned before, to really understand the Latino vote is we are a young population. Like many of us don't actually speak Spanish, right? And so like stop lumping us into this like corner that all you do is just speak Spanish and all you care about is immigration.
That's right. That's so right, Christian. And I think too, I want to also, yes. And I've been spending a lot of time at home, and I'm watching a lot of Univision again because my parents watch it at house. So we watch it from Despierta America to Primer Impacto, right? Like it's on the TV. And it's great, like, but it's such an interesting way for me to like also see what our community is receiving, because I separate of work, right? I've been phone banking, I've been trying to help Latinos register to vote, and I'm also starting to hear things from the community. And also, Christian, I think one of the things we should touch on as well is like the strong and amazing community partners that we work with at LCF, right? Because I want to say for all of you, right? Like, sure, like a lot of the time we can go out and do something, yes, and there's already these amazing organizations which are doing a lot of amazing work on the ground in Spanish, in Vietnamese, in Tagalog, and other languages that are helping get out the vote with communities of color. And Christian, I kind of want to pivot a little bit because I feel like right now, we've kind of gone for the two ends. Some people are frustrated, disenchanted. Some folks are like, oh, I don't want to go out to vote. Other people are like really eager. They're fired up about this election and they're like, yes, more than ever before. Wherever we are on the spectrum, like, because I want to recognize that maybe we could have a potentially mixed group of folks here that are watching this. What can we do as eligible and non-eligible voters to be engaged, to do something, to turn our frustration into action?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a really great question, Amber. So let me say this: no matter your citizenship status, right? If you live in this country, you have an absolute right to say how you want this country to be, right? So for non-eligible voters, right? So somebody who may be undocumented, somebody who may be under 18 years old, right?
That's right.
So you can actually serve as poll workers. So if you're a legal permanent resident, at least here in the state of California, you can actually serve as a poll worker. That is actually one of the most concrete things you can do to actually make sure that this particular election goes as smoothly and fairly as possible, right? If you are somebody that can speak Spanish, right, or some other language, right, every single election, there's always a need for language translation, right? So if you're a legal permanent resident, right, you can actually sign up to be a poll worker. And that's actually, and if you're somebody on the younger side, that's actually needed now more than ever because of COVID-19. Because while, yes, we're encouraging people to vote early, to vote by mail, vote by these drop boxes, there are still going to be people that want to vote in person, right? And they have that right. So for somebody who may be a legal permanent resident watching this, like, please sign up to be a poll worker, because it is such an important way to make sure that our democracy survives this moment, right? And then for eligible voters, right? It's obviously vote, register to vote, then vote. And I think what I'm about to say can apply for both eligible and non-eligible. Everybody can phone bank. Everybody can do texting. I have seen organizations actually do the drop off of mailers. It's kind of weird right now with COVID-19, but slowly but surely, as we begin to understand this virus a little bit more, I think people are feeling a little bit more comfortable. I'm not advising that. I mean, obviously follow your local public health guidance, but thank you, Martin, for dropping in that poll worker link. But yeah, and to your other point that you were mentioning, Amber, it's interesting because whenever we have get out the vote efforts, right? Too often we see like videos from like Eva Longoria or like celebrities, right? That gets attention, sure. But those type of people will never compare to your own sister, your own mother, brother, yes, uncle, whoever it is, to actually influence you to vote, right? Because all voting is personal, right? And so for all of you are connected to somebody, right? And it's actually more meaningful that you text 3 people after this webinar, because more likely that person is actually going to read your text to either encourage them to register to vote, to turn out to vote, to help them find their local drop box or whatever it is, or just sign up as a poll worker, right? So I really highly encourage not just eligible voters, but all people, because like I started off with this answer, everybody, no matter your citizenship status, has a stake in this democracy, and nobody can take away that right from you.
That's right. And I'm gonna add one more thing, Christian, to what you just said. Feel free to text the person right now. Don't wait till after this event, we don't mind if you turn away for 1 minute to just send a text to your family member, because yes, Christian, I want to uplift that. I want to uplift the fact that the best thing we can do is a personal touch. I can tell you, in the last midterm election, I was like going around and I was checking with one of my cousins, and I was like, hey, you're registered to vote, right, by mail? And he was like, yeah. He said, well, can we check? I'm like, for sure, let's check together. We checked, and he was registered to vote for 2 previous addresses where he lived way before. And I was like, no, you're not. You're not going to get your ballot. And he had no idea, right? Another time, my cousin's mom just became a citizen. And I was like, hey, did she get registered to vote yet? And they were like, oh, we don't know how to do it. She wants to do it, but in Spanish. And I'm like, okay, here's the link, sent it your way, right? And also, I think that I don't necessarily consider myself like the expert, right? I still have to do my research. I don't automatically understand what all of these propositions mean. I don't automatically know exactly who I'm going to vote for in my local elections, because I have to do the research. I have to do that work. Now, to what Christian was saying earlier, a lot of this information is not always accessible or easy to understand for anybody, even if you're a native English speaker, even if you're, whatever. A lot of the time the language can be confusing. And I'm saying that because for us, it's so important for us to be able to touch base with our familias. Because like for me, what I'm going to do after this session is I'm going to text all my tias. I'm like, hey tia, hey tío, ya les llegó su boleto. Did you get it? And then what we always do as a family here, my core 4, is what we do is we get together, we look at the propositions together, and we vote together. We don't vote the same, not necessarily always, but we do it together, and then we send it together.
Yeah, what I'll add to that is when journalists and media have been contacting the Latino Community Foundation to ask about these questions, I always tell them that the most underreported story in politics is the power of WhatsApp in Latino families.
Yes.
The tonterias that I get from my dad and my mom of memes and silly videos. It is also the occasion where they're passing out information about propositions, about ballots. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a WhatsApp group of like 50 people in my family. I have to turn off the notifications sometimes because it's just too much. But but that's how you organize, right? And actually, I mean, unfortunately, we're living in the age of COVID, but like this is a way to get information to your families or your friends, right? Or both, right? To make sure that they understand what exactly is at stake at this election and how to vote. I saw Amber pinned our, I don't know if we'll get to this point, Amber, but we have a Latino voter guide. Right now. Yeah, we have a Latino voter guide. Hopefully a lot of people are from California watching this right now, but this is a California specific Latino voter guide. So the reason why we create this voter guide was because you may notice already in the mail that you get a lot of literature. Vote for this, vote for that. Here's this, here's that, right? But never really do we get materials that talks to us specifically as Latinos, right? So we have very basic information about, how to register to vote, how to vote in this election under COVID, but also explanations about why your vote matters, right? I think we often get pigeonholed into those conversations about like, oh, what's the point? Like, what am I going to do? Like, nothing is ever going to change, right? What I always tell people as well is that, yes, I mean, who our next president is super important, but it's so much more than Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. It's also about your local House races, these ballot propositions. In the era of Black Lives Matter, right? Who is your district attorney? Who is your local sheriff? Those positions are super important too. If we want to fight for racial justice in this country. So this voter guide is meant to help start that conversation, right? It's a nonpartisan voter guide. We're not here to tell you how to vote, but at the end of the day, we want you to be informed voters, because an informed voter is a very powerful voter, right? And that's the type of civic engagement that we want to build within the Latino community, and especially with you all who are so young, right? Because everybody trusts. I feel like people trust our generation, right, Amber? we seem to know what we're doing sometimes, but yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything else, Amber.
No, I think that's great, Christian. And I am screen sharing it right now. By the way, this is in Spanish and in English, so it's bilingual. But we're sharing this because it's something that we're also personally sharing with our own families. It's something that we hear is often needed from the community. So I think that's really what we're trying to highlight here. And chances are, if you're not in California, and there probably is a similar like foundation to ours that's trying to do this work as well. Maybe not a full-on Latino voter guide, but there are resources out there. And so if you are able and you can actually like find this information, or maybe create something similar for yourself, I highly encourage you to do that as well. I've had friends that are doing it. So it's something that we're hoping that gets distributed, because we do see it as a way for us to inform the community a little bit more.
And since this is a tech crowd, what I would say is, so there are three propositions that, well, actually two propositions that the Latino Community Foundation is really focused on. I won't tell you how to vote for them, but let me just elevate them to your consciousness. So Prop 15 is known as the Schools and Communities First Initiative. Long story short, if it passes, it's going to change the way we tax commercial and industrial properties in the state of California, right? Because for over 4 decades, they haven't been paying taxes on their properties, their land, at fair market value, right? So if that does pass, it's going to bring back $12 billion back for local schools and communities. So when you read about it in our voter guide, you'll see who's for it, who's against it, and what it will mean for the Latino community. On Prop 16, Prop 16 is actually meant to bring back affirmative action to the state of California. I obviously don't work in tech, but I have plenty of friends that do. I feel like I've been in so many conversations about how we can't find qualified Latinos, right, to work at Google or Facebook, right? The pipeline is somehow magically broken. But it's such a long process to obviously, recruitment and retention is super important, but how do we get more young Latinos into higher education, right? And into these STEM fields as potential majors, right? So for the past 25 years, California has banned the consideration of race and gender and ethnicity when making decisions in enrollment for higher education. So that's something that I would ask all of you to really look into, because both Prop 15 and Prop 16 are going to have a consequential impact on the Latino community one way or another, right? Obviously, there's also the prop around independent contractors, which I don't know if anyone from Uber or Lyft is on here, but yeah, I would also read up on that one too.
That's right. And I just want to shout out some of the folks that are commenting in the chat. Deanna, it's so great that you're voting for that your mom's going to be it's her first time voting, and it's awesome that you're going to sit down and do that with her. I think one of the things that we often talk about is also how we can continue to build this culture of voting and engagement with our familias as well. And that's something really beautiful. I did type this into the chat. So if you all have any questions that are coming up for you that you want to ask us, please let us know. I did see a couple earlier on.
There was one on voter suppression, I think.
Yep. There was one on voter suppression, and it says, would you all be able to speak on how we can prevent forms of voter suppression?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard for me to take that question because we live in the state of California. Not to say that it doesn't happen in the state of California, but I'm very blessed that the way we conduct our elections, for the most part, is usually very fair and simple, right? But I think to return to the original point that I made about the importance of serving as poll workers, I feel like I had this conversation with you, Amber, like not too long ago, about how even places like the Central Valley, right? If a Latino family that, let's say, doesn't speak English walks up to a polling place at 7:59 p.m., you hear cases where poll workers say, oh, it's too late, you can't vote, when the law says that if you're in line by 8 p.m. on election night, you have the right to vote, right?
That's right.
These are the little forms of voter suppression that happen in all places, right? And especially in usually more scarier places of this country, right? So that's why I really encourage you. All of you can actually be the guardians of democracy. If you actually sign up to be poll workers and help people understand their rights, right? I just named one example. Another example is, if you don't speak English, you can ask for a ballot in your language, right? And you hear all the nonsense sometimes where they say, "Oh, I don't have that." It's like, no. Yes, you do, right? So yeah. So I don't know if you want to add anything else, Amber.
No, Christian, I think the only other thing again is it's reinforcing the fact of how important we are, like to inform our families, because I think there are a lot of myths that go around that, or like fears that surround the community sometimes. And I think that we can play that role in our families to help demystify that, right? I have had questions from family members, and I think that having that direct contact and that open line of communication is really important. And the one thing I keep repeating this because I want to urge you all not to assume.
Right.
I cannot assume that because I am civically engaged, that my cousin that we grew up together, we're like super tight, is also engaged. I double check, I check in all the time, because I have already had experiences where it wasn't the case, where they weren't registered or they were feeling just disenchanted and didn't want to. Had conversations with them. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't, but at least I know that I made that extra reach. And they listen to me because we're homies, we grew up together, we're family, right? And so that's really the way that we can change the way that we do things. I'm gonna invite Ariel, because apparently there's this really cool function for us to also invite folks into the space. So Ariel, I think you have a question. I'm gonna try and loop you in. So let's see if this works.
This is too high tech for me.
Me too. Did I do it? I don't know if I did it.
As Amber figures that out, shameless plug, if you want to use our hashtag Yo Voy a Votar and tag the Latino Community Foundation on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, don't think that it doesn't work. There's actually proven research that the more messages you see about voting on social media, especially positive ones and pictures with you and your ballot, people actually get FOMO. They really do. And they don't want to be seen as being left out of this process. So we're highly encouraging everyone to use our hashtag Yo Voy a Votar, to either post pictures of yourself voting or telling other people to vote, sharing our voter guide, sharing information, because it works. Trust me. Like I'm not just saying it to boost our numbers for our hashtag, but it actually does work.
Yeah, and again, this is I want to state the fact, because I feel like I've gotten some pushback from friends that are like, "Oh, Amber, but I don't want to be like political on my social media. Like, my social media is just for fun." And like, sure, I get it, I understand that, but it's also like, how are we showing up for our families and for our communities? That's really what you're doing. I think right now things can seem so polarized because they are. And I think for me, it's more like, how do we recenter it to the whole point of why we even have elections, right? It's supposed to be this democratic process where we are all able to have this voice in the decisions that are made, and in electing folks that are going to help make decisions that are best for the community. And if there aren't folks that we feel are best placed for that, we vote in somebody new. But if we're not voting, our voice isn't being shared. And Christian, last night at Boletas y Chelas, you said this really great point, which was, if you're not voting, somebody else is voting to make decisions for you, right? And I think that's really the way that we need to think about this, and think about the work that we're doing. Because at the end of the day, like, if we're allowing other people to make decisions for us, we're not stepping up. Like, sure, I vote for myself, but I'm voting for my family. I vote for my parents. Like, the reason why I got engaged since I was, unintentionally or unknowingly at 5, but more intentionally when I was in high school, for a measure to try and get more money to my school, registering people to vote before I was eligible to vote. Like, the reason I did those things was not for me. It was because of the greater good for our community. That's really why I do this stuff. Like, I've never considered myself a highly political person. I see myself as an organizer. I see myself as someone who cares about her community. And this is the way to get money to the community. This is a way to get representation for my community. And this is a way for, families like mine that are an immigrant family, can get the dreams and reach the goals that they came to this country for. That's what I see it as. Ariel, I'm so sorry. I did accept you into the space. If you want to try one more time, I'm happy to accept you again. Or if anybody else wants to ask a question and join us live here, we'd be more than happy to welcome you into the space.
Voter suppression. You won't let me answer my question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, I guess as we wait, maybe if people have questions, I guess I'll just make another shameless plug to vote early. I'm literally going to vote after this session. I got my ballot yesterday in the mail. It's super, super important to remember to sign your ballot. I will say that to the end of days, right? Because in California, for the March primary, 100,000 ballots were not counted because either people didn't sign it or they turned it in too late, right? That cannot be, right? And so it's very important that as soon as you get your ballot, if you want to vote by mail, right, make sure to sign it and you turn it in by election day.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I know it sounds like we're just saying the same thing over and over again, but let me tell you, I shared this with Christian the other day because I was phone banking. I was helping people register to vote. I'm doing in collaboration with one of our community partners, Mi Familia Vota, and also with Univision. So I've been helping register people to vote in Spanish. And I'm sharing this because I think it's important. And again, I'm trying for us to like move away from making assumptions. I was on a call and this guy was really frustrated. He's like, I'm registered to vote. I got my ballot and it's all in Spanish. But it's wrong. Like not all of the candidates are on my list. And I'm like, okay, can you read them out loud to me? And long story short, he didn't realize that Joseph R. Biden was the same thing as Joe Biden, right? And it seems funny, but like when you think about it, the language barrier here, like we in English know that Joe, it can be short for Joseph, in the same way that I think it's like that we have nicknames in Spanish, right? My gosh, and he was about to submit it without voting because he was just mad that he didn't have the option. And we talked through it, and he was like, "Oh, okay," because that just happened to be the candidate that he wanted to vote for, so that's why he informed me of that, and then I was helping him go to the ballot. But again, these are just like things that we need to not assume about our community. It's like meeting them where they're at. We have two questions in the chat here. One from Diana. How can we find out where our ballot drop boxes are in our county and city?
Yeah, so Diana, depending on where you're located from, I think just generally speaking, your local county elections website will have that information, right? So, I live in Alameda County here in California. Amber right now is in San Joaquin County in California. So you can go straight to your county elections website. They will have that information, or the general like statewide like Secretary of State's website can also make sure that you get the right links to find out where exactly your ballot drop boxes are. Just to add to that, my parents, when they got their ballot, they're down in LA County, and actually said in the information where their local drop box was as well. So this information is actually very easy to find. But just go to your elections county website or the statewide one. It should be relatively easy to find. Martine's question.
Great question.
What should we expect after the election? So let me say this, because I feel like these conversations are, or should we let Martine in?
Did it.
Okay.
Okay, awesome.
I feel like I'm everywhere.
Martine.
Yes. Go ahead, Christian. I feel like you were you had the idea.
So let me say this. I know how impatient we can be as people, especially us people, especially like, I don't know, I feel like I've been at too many parties. I'm like, oh my God, can this song finish already? Right? It is going to take a while to count ballots. I'm going to say that again. It is going to take a while to count ballots. Do not start popping bottles of Cristal on election night. Do not do that.
That's right.
Right? It is going to take a very long time, as it should. Every vote needs to be counted, right? No matter the outcome, right? Because what we don't want to happen is a bunch of fake news saying that there were missing ballots here or blah, 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 this and yada, yada, that. Our democracy is one where we count every single vote. So it's very important to remember that. Once the election is called for whoever, president, mayor, district attorney, propositions, whatever, we all have a responsibility to hold those people accountable, to make sure that these propositions that we're voting for are actually implemented in the ways that we want them to, right? I'm very sorry for everybody, but this idea of civic engagement, it is the daily struggle, right? What happens too often is that when we take our eye off the ball, that's when money gets shifted from schools to the police. This is what happens when executive orders say, oh, we're going to start to criminalize immigrants in this country, right? I was just telling Amber right before we jumped on live, like, I'm exhausted, to be honest with you. Like, this is exhausting work, right? But it's important work. And the burden is not all of you. If all you want to do is send the email to your local city council saying, you know what, I think we should demand mask. Everyone should be wearing masks during COVID-19. That's very powerful civic engagement that could actually save lives, right? So, you know, no matter who you support, it actually does not change the fact that there's still more work to be done. Because until the day that we feel that our community is being treated the right way, like, it's going to be a perpetual fight.
That's right, Christian. That's a great point. I want to also just call out that many of you that are on this call, I mean, hopefully there's a lot of you that are here to learn. But I've noticed that a lot of you that are on this call are already engaged. You already work with some of you work with organizations that are doing similar work to ours, which is awesome. Thank you so much for plugging in your links, for sharing that. But this is a reminder to engage your non-political family, your non-political friends, because it makes no sense for me, Christian, Martin, to continue to say this to the same people over and over again and get yelled all the time. We don't need that. We need to be engaging with the people that are like, no, that's bullshit, or like whatever, right? But that's what we need to be engaging with, the people that aren't going to listen to us, that maybe do have pushback, because that's where we're going to make a change. Like, I could care less if 10,000 people showed up to this call, but everybody was already voting. If 50 people showed up and there was and none of them are registered to vote yet, and we got them to register to vote, that's the kind of reach and impact that I want us to be making. And Christian and I can't do it alone. Christian's exhausted. He's tired. We need to let him sleep. Our community partners like Dolores Huerta Foundation, Brown Issues, 99 Roots, Power California, Siren, Mi Familia Vota, they are tired because they are working day in and day out to register people to vote, to try and get them out in the streets. But what we can do as individuals is work with our families. A lot of us have really big families. A lot of us have families that maybe this is not something that they're used to doing in the United States. This is where we as individuals can really make sure that we are bringing them in. And it's okay if they don't agree. It's okay if they don't vote the same way as you do, but we need to get into this culture of us getting engaged and going out to vote. Go ahead.
So I just dropped this really awesome New York Times op-ed that was published a couple months ago. This idea about vote tripling. What Amber just said is spot on. What it boils down to is literally text, call, message 3 people. That's all we're asking for. And ask them to contact 3 people as well. Because all of a sudden, that's how you start to build the movement, right? And what this op-ed talks about, how, and I'm sure many of you are part of like these campaign listers, you get all these texts and you say stop, right, to stop getting them. But you can't do that to your friends or your family, right? They're going to stop texting you. So this doesn't have to be a big Herculean effort. It's literally 3 people, right? We have like these cool signs that say, Latinos vote, like use our stuff, as a way to have these conversations. So 3 people after this is over, please make sure you get it done.
And you all feel free to follow Latino Community Foundation on our social, where I just put our social. We're found with that with that name across all social media platforms because we do have some collateral that you all can share, including our Latino voter guide as well. So to close off, I would like you all to share, and Martin, I'm going to include you in this, one thing that you've done already this year to either get your family or friends engaged with the elections.
All right, shameless plug, but there's an event called Baja Fest, and for everyone that's going to that event, I told them, if y'all want to come to this in this like house with me, I better see a ballot with a vote. If you don't, you're not invited. But what that actually engaged was a lot of them had never voted. They're like, I chose to not be, so we all championed around reggaeton and we voted through reggaeton. So there you go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. Cultura meets engagement, meets civic engagement. I love that. Great job, Martin. What about you, Christian? Besides your job,
can you repeat the question again? Like, I want to make sure I get this.
What's one thing that you've already done to be engaged with this election this year, besides your job?
My job, yeah. So actually, I mean, I'm wearing this swear. I went to Georgetown University for my undergrad. All of my friends who I went to school with, who I know have family members in California who are not Latino, I sent them text messages saying like, oh, I know your cousin lives in Merced. Like, can you pass them this information? Especially for Prop 15 and 16. Yeah, so I've been doing that a lot of that, right? Because obviously, like, I'll talk to all my Latinos, like, and we'll do that. But it's so much more than that. I think there are close to 21 million registered voters in the state of California. Like, this needs to be a collective effort across all racial ethnic backgrounds.
Yes, and with that, I'll close off with mine, Christian. That was a great unintentional segue. But I personally, like Kristen just said, like when we think of communities of color, what we have to understand is that our liberations are tied together. Sure, Christian and I work at LCF. Martin is part of our Latinos in Tech Giving Circle. We're all connected here. And at the same time, right, many of us come from a background of variety of different communities. My best friend is Vietnamese. Her and I have a very close shared relationship of like that first gen experience. And my goal right now is to get her mom registered to vote. She's like my husband, and I've never been able to communicate with her mom because her mom only speaks Vietnamese. And through my friend, I'm like, Julie, we're gonna get your mom registered to vote this time. And she's like, yeah, haha, good luck. But I'm trying, like, I'm looking for information in Vietnamese that can try and convince her mom, because she thinks just because the dad's doing it, like that's enough. And I'm like, it's not enough. Super different, right? There's that. And I'm also trying to make sure that my family is informed. So I'm going to host a Zoom ballot party for my family on Sunday, where I'm actually going to go over our Latino voter guide that we just sent out, because that is what I'm doing. And I'm really trying hard to make sure that my family has all their questions answered as well, because I want them to also feel ownership in the choices that are being made, right? I think when you're an immigrant in this country, I don't think it's always easy to feel like all the agency that you have. I've noticed, and I'm speaking that directly to my parents' experience, right? For me, my activism, my leadership has been in partnership with my parents. My involvement has been in partnership with my parents. It is a family effort. It is a communal effort. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to get them to also get their community as well. Okay. So with that, if you aren't registered to vote, please do so. If you are registered to vote because you're eligible and you're voting, feel free to share our Latino voter guide. But please, 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 please stay engaged.
Oh, good. He has his ballot. Vote early, vote early, vote early, vote early, please.
All right, folks. Thank you all so much. Feel free to connect with us on social. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn as well. We're trying to share as many resources as possible. And if you feel like we missed anything or need anything more from us, just let us know. Thank you all so much. And I see Lily commenting. Join us at ltxfest.com. We're having a big LTX Fest next week, where our CEO is actually leading a similar conversation to this on Friday with some of our favorite organizers. So we hope to see you all there. Have a beautiful weekend. Y hasta pronto para todos.
Bye.
Ciao.